"The greatest wedding gift you could give me," my sister said, "is to disappear from this family. Forever." She said it the way someone reads a grocery list. Calm. Specific. Like she had rehearsed it enough times that the words had gone smooth and round, worn down to nothing sharp on the outside. I looked at my mother. She looked at the centerpiece on the table, a small vase of grocery store carnations still in their plastic sleeve. My father set down his fork. He didn't pick it up again, but he didn't say anything either. He nodded once, the way men nod when they've already decided something is not their business. The room was not silent. Someone's chair scraped. A woman at the far end of the table, Todd's aunt I think though we had only met once, reached for the bread basket and then stopped. Renee set down her own fork and folded her hands in front of her. Patient, the way she was patient when she had already done the difficult part and was waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. Todd looked at the ceiling for a moment and then at the wall. His expression was the expression of a man who had been told about this in advance and had agreed to stay quiet. The Briarfield Community Center smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. There were folding tables pushed together to form a long rectangle, and the overhead lights made everyone look slightly wrong, slightly washed out. My fiancé, Derek, sat 2 seats down from me. I watched his jaw go tight and then go slack and then go tight again. He reached for my hand under the table and I let him hold it, but I couldn't feel much. My fingers had gone distant from me. What none of them knew, not my sister, not my parents, not the woman from the venue who had stepped outside to take a phone call, was that the house was already in my name alone. Had been for 11 years. And I had a real estate agent's card in my coat pocket that I'd been carrying for 6 days. My name is Claire Voss. I was 34 years old when this happened. I work in municipal permitting, land use applications, variance requests, the particular bureaucratic grammar of telling someone what they can and cannot build on a piece of ground. It is not a glamorous job. It requires patience and an ability to read documents that most people find unreadable, and I am good at both. The house on Teller Road in Delwood, Ohio had belonged to my grandmother. Not to my parents. Not to the family in any distributed sense. To my grandmother, Meredith Voss, who had bought it in 1971 with money she saved working the overnight shift at a parts manufacturer for 9 years. When she died, she left it to me specifically. My mother's name was not in the will. My sister Renee's name was not in it. There was a letter with the deed that explained why, in my grandmother's handwriting, though I never showed that letter to anyone. My parents had been living in the house for 6 years before my grandmother passed. I had been living in it for 4, helping cover the property taxes, the roof repair in 2016, the water heater, the 2 stretches when my father's work dried up and someone had to keep the lights on. When my grandmother died and the deed transferred to me, my mother said at the kitchen table that it was the right thing and that family takes care of family and that we would all figure it out together. My father nodded. Renee, who was 26 at the time and lived 40 minutes away and had not once come to a repair weekend, said nothing. Nothing changed after the transfer except the name on the paperwork. My parents kept their room. I kept mine. The house kept needing things and I kept being the one who handled them. Renee came for holidays. She came for birthdays. She came when she needed to borrow the truck, or when she wanted Mom's recipe boxes, or when she had a bad week and needed somewhere to feel steady. She was charming in the way people are charming when they have never been asked to carry anything. She laughed easily. She filled a room. My parents brightened when she walked in the way they did not particularly brighten when I did, and I had learned over many years not to track that. There is a kind of contribution that never gets itemized because no one thinks of it as contribution at all. It is just the water the house swims in. In the years between my grandmother's death and the night at the Briarfield Community Center, I had kept that house the way you keep something you understand belongs to you in a way that has nothing to do with sentiment. I handled the structural things, the pointing work on the chimney, the drainage fix along the east foundation, the permit pull for the accessory structure my father wanted in the back that he never actually built but that I got approved anyway because he asked me to. When the boiler made a sound like a ship in a storm 2 winters running, I found the technician, scheduled the visits, stood in the basement and translated what he told me into plain language for my father, who nodded as though he'd already known. There was a season, the winter Renee's first serious relationship ended, when my mother spent most of her energy on phone calls to Renee, long ones, the kind that went past midnight, and the house ran on whatever I managed between my own workdays. I am not describing this as sacrifice. I am describing it as the shape of those years. My father had a health scare in the spring. Nothing that became anything serious, but the kind of scare that requires tests and waiting rooms and someone to drive. I drove. I sat in the plastic chairs. I brought the paperwork home and read the discharge instructions twice to make sure I understood what to watch for, and then I watched for it. Renee sent flowers. They came in a box from a website, still in plastic tubes of water, and my mother put them in the good vase and said Renee was so thoughtful. I was not keeping a ledger. But the ledger existed whether I was keeping it or not. What I did keep, the only thing I actively tracked, was the deed. I had it in the top drawer of my dresser in a manila envelope with the county recorder's seal on the return address. I knew exactly what it said. I had read it enough times that I knew which corner of the page the notary stamp landed on. The dinner at Briarfield had been called a wedding planning session. Renee was marrying a man named Todd, whom she had been with for 2 years. He was fine. He made a good salary and laughed at the right moments and had the specific confidence of someone who had never been told he was in the way. We were discussing venues. Renee had a binder. My mother had a list on her phone. I had come because I was asked, and because not coming would have meant a 2-week weather system in the house. It started when Renee brought up the reception. "We're thinking here, actually," she said. "The community center does Saturday evening packages. It would work perfectly." "That sounds reasonable," I said. "It would be, except we'd need to cover the deposit by the 1st of next month, and we're a little stretched." She looked at me across the folded table rectangle. "We were hoping you'd cover it. As your gift." The deposit was $14,780. "I wasn't planning on that," I said. "Claire." My mother's voice was the kind of gentle that is not actually gentle. "It's her wedding." "I understand that." "You have the house," Renee said. The way she said "you have the house," not as a fact but as an argument, as a thing she was owed relief from. "I do," I said. "So this isn't really a stretch for you." "I'm not paying the deposit, Renee." Her face changed. Not dramatically, just a kind of flattening, like a door closing quietly. "I knew you'd do this," she said. "You've always done this." "Done what?" "Made everything about yourself. Made everyone feel like they owe you." My father said, "Let's not." "No," Renee said, and her voice went smooth and flat and certain. "I've been wanting to say this. The greatest wedding gift you could give me, Claire, is to disappear from this family. Forever." She picked up her water glass. "We'd all be better off." I waited. The sound in the room was the HVAC running and someone's phone buzzing once in a pocket. "You've been a weight on this family your entire life," she said. I looked at my mother. My mother looked at the carnations. "You're ungrateful," my mother said quietly to me. "For everything we've done." My father set down his fork. Something went still in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just the particular flatness that comes before a decision you have already made without knowing you'd made it. I folded my napkin. I set it on the table. I said, "Okay," and I stood up. Derek followed me out into the parking lot. The air was cold and smelled like wet pavement. He put his hand on my shoulder and I stood there for a moment and let the cold come in through my coat. I thought about the deed in the dresser drawer. I thought about the notary stamp and which corner of the page it landed on. I had not planned this. But I understood, standing in that parking lot with the HVAC exhaust from the building drifting past us, that I had been ready for it for longer than I had known. "What do you want to do?" he said. "I already know," I said. The next morning was Thursday. I called Margaret Ellery at 8 a.m. She had given me her card 6 days earlier at the county recorder's office, where I had gone to pull a copy of the deed for a work reference and run into her at the counter. I had taken the card without thinking much about why. I told her I needed a market assessment. I called the venue coordinator at the Briarfield Community Center and canceled the preliminary hold I had agreed to place on the Saturday evening room as a courtesy. I drove to Harkin County Recorder's office. I stood at the counter and requested the formal transfer documentation review. I walked every room of the house on Teller Road. I stood on the porch step, the one I had poured myself over 2 weekends the previous summer, mixing the concrete in a rented drum mixer, pressing the wood form into place, smoothing the top with a margin trowel until it was level. My initials were in the lower right corner, pressed with a stick while the concrete was still workable. CV. The letters were shallow and clean. I went back inside. I called Margaret Ellery again. I told her I was ready to list. Margaret listed the house on a Friday. The first offer came in on Monday at $683,500. Renee found out from my mother, who found out from the Zillow listing, which a neighbor had texted her about on a Wednesday morning. My phone showed her first call at 11:14 a.m. I did not answer. She called 4 more times before noon. Then she texted, "Claire, call me right now, this is insane." Then, "You cannot sell that house. That is our house. Mom and Dad live there." Then a longer one that I read once and set the phone face down on my desk. She was at the community center that Saturday. They were doing a venue walkthrough with Todd, and she called Derek's number when she couldn't reach me. Derek told her I was unavailable. She told him what she thought of that. He was calm about it. He is a calm man, which is one of the reasons I was planning to marry him. I agreed to meet her at the community center in the lobby because I had a reason to be there anyway. I needed to pick up a document the venue coordinator had printed for me. Renee was already inside when I arrived. Todd was not with her. She looked like she had not slept, and her jaw was set in a way that meant she had been rehearsing. I crossed the lobby. My shoes made a flat sound on the tile. There was a rack of community center brochures near the door. Fitness schedules, a photography class, something about a senior lunch program. I noted them without reading them. The venue coordinator's desk was at the far end of the room. A document folder sat on the corner of it with my name written in marker on the tab. Renee was standing near the window that looked out onto the parking lot. She had her coat on still. Her bag was over one shoulder. She turned when I came in. She did not say hello. "You have to stop this," she said. "The sale's under contract," I said. "That's not Claire. Mom and Dad live there. You can't just." "They've been renting from me," I said. "Informally. They know that. They don't have anywhere to go. They have 60 days on the contract timeline. That's more than enough to find something. You are being unbelievably selfish. You told me to disappear from this family forever," I said. I took that seriously. Her face went through several things quickly. "I didn't mean that was about the wedding. I was frustrated. You meant it the way you said it. Claire. You said I was a weight. You said everyone would be better off." I kept my voice level. "So I removed the weight. This is not what I meant." "I know what you meant," I said. "You meant that the house should keep running and I should keep running it and you should not have to think about any of that. You meant you wanted me quiet and in place." I reached into my bag. I found the envelope. I took it out, the county recorder's envelope, the one with the embossed seal on the flap, thick paper, heavier than it looked. I opened the envelope on my phone's screen instead, pulled up the PDF of the recorded deed, the transfer paperwork, the signed sale agreement, and turned the screen toward her so she could read the top line. I laid the phone flat on the lobby counter between us. "It's been my name on that deed since Grandma died," I said. "You knew that. You just decided it didn't matter." She looked at the screen. Something in her went very still. "You used me," I said. "Not on purpose, maybe. But you used what I was willing to do, and when I stopped being willing, you told me to disappear." I picked up the phone. "So." I put the phone back in my bag. "Here's what I know," I said. "I kept that house for 11 years. I kept it before Grandma died and I kept it after. You came for holidays." I paused. "That house was mine. The work in it was mine. The decision about it is mine. She said, "You're going to regret this." I said, "Okay." I picked up the venue coordinator's document from the counter. I thanked the coordinator. I walked out. The cold air hit the back of my neck, and I stood in the parking lot for a moment, my hand on my bag strap, and I could feel the shape of the phone through the fabric. Solid, present, the deed still on the screen. That was 14 months ago. Derek and I got married in April in his aunt's backyard in Findlay, with 30 people and a rented tent and no venue coordinator. It cost us what it cost us and not a dollar more. We bought a house. A small one, a 1962 ranch on Crestfield Drive in Delwood, with a cracked driveway and original windows and a back porch that needed work. The first weekend we were there, I mixed a batch of concrete and poured a new step for the side entry. I pressed my initials into the lower right corner again. CV. Then Derek pressed his below mine. DH. The letters sat in the cured concrete, shallow and permanent, and ours. My mother called once, 3 months after the sale closed. She said she and my father had found a rental in Medina and that it was fine, it was perfectly fine, and that she hoped I was happy with myself. I said I was glad they'd found something. She hung up before I finished the sentence. Renee has not called since the community center lobby. There was one text 8 months ago. "I hope you know what you did to this family." I read it on a Tuesday afternoon sitting at my desk at the permitting office. I set the phone down. I went back to the variance application I was reviewing. I have not responded. I am not carrying a ledger anymore. That is the thing I notice most, the absence of it. When you have been keeping an invisible accounting for long enough, you don't realize how much weight it has until it's gone. Not the house. Not the money. The accounting. There are people who will tell you that family is unconditional. I think what they mean is that loyalty should be unconditional. But loyalty is not a feeling. It is a pattern of action, sustained over time, in the direction of someone specific. I sustained it for 11 years. They banked on it and never once looked at the balance. If any part of this sounds familiar, if you have ever been the one who stayed and kept things running while someone else showed up for the easy parts, share this with someone who needs to hear it. You are not imagining the weight. And you are allowed to set it down. Derek and I sat on that new porch step last Sunday. The morning was cold and still, and the concrete under us was solid, the way things are solid when you built them yourself. I ran my thumb over the letters in the lower right corner. They were exactly where I left them.